Yes, we're live. So, good evening, everybody. I'm Miles, and yeah, we just thought let's just catch up a bit with some of the fisheries experts regarding FRAP. The person that we have here doesn't really need introduction. He's quite au fait with what's happening in the fishing industry, being a few FRAPs, a successful FRAP. And I just wanted to chat to him about what's happening. I mean, in FRAP, so much is happening, but on the other hand, so little is happening. The last time we got a gazette of what the timeline is, but I just wanted to tap a bit. I wanted to tap Shaheen Moolla's brain, and yeah, just speak a little bit about FRAP. Shaheen, thanks so much on this winter's evening. So much for your time.
No, thanks for having me, Miles.
Cool, man. Yeah, so let's just jump right straight into it, because I just have a small timeline in my head, and I just thought, okay, let's just do it chronologically, and then I just want to tap your brain about a few questions. So where do we start? So 2015, 2016, we had a FRAP process, and of the FRAP process, there were about also 10 sectors that were up for renewal, and we currently have 2 that have not been finalized yet. We had some interesting court judgments recently, hake inshore and the horse mackerel. Maybe I can chat to you a bit about first. I'm a bit in the dark about the hake inshore trawl one. I know back then there was an interdict and all those things happening. So can you maybe give us like an indication where's the hake inshore trawl? I know they released something for the appeals. What's the timeline there? Do you maybe have any understanding of that, Shane?
Yeah, okay. So unlike horse mackerel, where the industry led by BCP got an order last year, December, in the Cape High Court specifying that the minister had to deal with those appeals, the horse mackerel appeals within 7 months, and that's subsequently been extended. In the various hake inshore trawl review applications, there were 9 in total, 9 separate hake inshore trawl reviews. The minister lost every single one of them, which is a precedent in its own right. None of them specified a timeline for the reconsideration of any specific individual matter or the appeal. So where we are is essentially with hake inshore trawl is that the minister has to still decide all the hake inshore trawl appeals. So effectively with hake inshore trawl, we are back in early 2017. That's how far back we are and how far behind we are. So that's essentially where we are, is that the minister has still, to this day, failed to decide some 70-odd hake inshore trawl appeals. And that's now 5 years and counting.
Wow. Okay. And then horse mackerel. Yeah, similarly, horse mackerel appeals in recently also. The appeals also found to be unlawful for, I think it was Okwana at that time. It was also, there was a deadline given for appeals. I understand that there is an extension. Can you maybe give us what is the feeling for that extension? I think it was the 3rd of November or something.
Yeah, so the High Court in December last year issued an order against the minister, essentially reviewing and setting aside the minister's decision on the horse mackerel appeals. There was incredibly misunderstanding on the minister's side as to what that judgment meant, despite there being broad understanding between people in industry. I know there was concurrence between my own view and then industry's attorneys' views about what it meant. But as is traditionally the case, is that the minister has a different view and then leaves it until the last minute. And so that last minute was at the very end of June. She was given until the 3rd of July, 2021, to decide the 50-odd horse mackerel appeals. She failed to do so. On the 30th of June or thereabout, her attorneys, the state represented by the state attorney, Leon Manuel, approached the Western Cape High Court on an urgent basis. And that was heard on the 2nd of July. It was the Friday, to seek an extension to allow the minister until the 3rd of November to decide some 50-odd appeals. That in itself is quite an admission of failure on the minister's side, is that if she can't decide 50 appeals in 7 months, it's breathtaking. She's now wanting almost a year to decide 50 appeals. God alone knows how she's going to decide thousands of FRAP applications based on our own time frame. So the horse mackerel appeals matter is now being delayed until at least the 3rd of November. And I fully expect that come the 3rd of November, there'll be a further extension.
So tell me, Shaheen, so with the 3rd November was like industry, did they, did they contest the request to extend it? I mean, or was it just like everybody's happy with the extension to the 3rd November?
Well, it was unopposed, and that's, broadly expected, because everybody, existing operators, and then the new entrants that were granted rights, that were initially dispossessed of those rights, are all to fish. And that's because of various other court matters that were brought in the intervening period. There was an urgent application brought by a whole group of new entrants led by Maibuye Fishing. They got their order also in their favor, allowing them to continue fishing. So it wasn't obviously in anybody's interests, new or existing, for to oppose the matter and incur costs. And also there was obviously no prejudice on their part for the minister to have this extended time frame.
Yeah, but tell me, Shaheen, I mean, you were part of a previous FRAP back in the day. I mean, I always find it weird that the minister, if his appeals are found unlawful and valid, the minister has to redo it. But in the past, has it ever happened that the same minister whose appeals that were found unlawful had to redo it, or but did they change after the minister was replaced by a new minister?
Well, the previous FRAPs or fishing rights allocation processes or long-term rights allocation process that I was involved in, we never lost a single case. So, so I can't really answer that. I've never lost a case. We've never had a single fishing rights process in 2001 or 5 ever set aside. Look, I mean, the reality is that usually in these kinds of matters is that when a minister's decision is reviewed and set aside, it is usually sent back to that minister, whether it's the same minister or subsequent different minister, for him or her to decide the appeals. The judiciary will very rarely step into the shoes of the executive and make a decision. It's only in cases that are so clear-cut. And there were a couple which we were involved in on behalf of clients in the boat-based whale watching and white shark cave diving sectors in 2018 and 2017, and even as late as 2019, where the court said that the Minister of Environmental Affairs at the time, her decisions were just so bad in law that the court essentially held that it had no faith in the ability of this minister to decide the matter correctly, also because of the umpteen numbers of errors, repeated errors. So the court then substitutes a decision on behalf of the minister in those cases. And I think we're going to start getting to that position with hake, inshore, and horse mackerel, because we cannot proceed to a new FRAP without those being decided. And of course, the most obvious reason for that is because, well, for the purpose of categorization of right holders come the new FRAP, are you an entirely new category C entrant, or are you a category B entrant? and that would depend on whether you are successful in these appeal processes. So I think we're going to soon get to the point where courts are going to be asked by the affected parties to start substituting judgment, because the minister is essentially a repeat offender, as it were.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you answered a bit of my question. So is it fact now that if the court does decide to extend to the 3rd of November, that FRAP 2020-2021 cannot commence prior to that?
No, yeah, absolutely. There's no way it's going to happen. And of course, not only for those reasons, it's not like we are all sitting on the sidelines waiting for 70 appeals in horse mackerel and 70 in hake inshore and 50 odd in horse mackerel to be decided. There is just nothing going on. There's nothing. The consultants that were supposed to have been appointed in January, I believe, on the minister's old time frame, have still not been appointed. You know, we on the minister's own timetable, we're about 6, 7, 8 months behind schedule. You know, on a realistic time frame, having dealt with a couple of these processes in my time before, and having regard to the expertise in front of the department, I think your guests and listeners will adequately recognize, considering the quality of those so-called socioeconomic impact studies that were published, you're probably 2 years away, excluding any litigation, before any rights are allocated. You know, people always say, "Oh, you know, aren't you being unrealistic?" Well, I say, well, firstly, look at, obviously, we were just talking about it, hake, inshore, trawl, and horse mackerel. If she can't decide those combined 120 odd appeals in more than a year, well, it's not going to happen. Look at abalone. Abalone has been outstanding since 2013. It's 8 years out of date, those rights allocation. So, you know, to say this may happen in 2023, I'm being very optimistic.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned, I mean, you're touching on all my things that I wanted to ask you. So I was also interested. So they published the Gazette for service providers, and then they just cancelled the tender. I mean, what's the thinking around that? Because I saw they did a legal one, and I think they did a accounting one or audit one. But what about all the others? I mean, the biggest one would certainly be the implementer, which would be the person to really help them implement FRAP. But I mean, why did they withdraw the tender?
So those were withdrawn and then republished. I don't know why they. I guess perhaps one of the reasons, of course, is nobody applying, or but as we know that for the FRAP implementer and the IT, the two key ones, as you correctly point out, those were republished in Feb and then March, and then those tenders closed in April. So you know, count it, April, you got the whole of May, June, July. So it's 3 months, and you know, the appointment of the specialist service providers haven't been confirmed. But that's also because if you look at who applied, oh my God, I mean, the FRAP implementer, it's a joke. You know, I don't think I'd appoint any of those companies to, you know, to clean offices. You know, the one company that caught my eye is the same entity that was integrally involved in the verification and identification of small-scale fishing communities in the Western Cape, which the minister has on own court papers reviewing her colleague Zokwana's previous decision to allocate rights to these cooperatives in the Western Cape, said it was hopelessly unlawful and irrational, and set out a whole plethora of reasons as to why it should be set aside. So the long and short is that there's actually nobody around that applied. So the department is, and the minister of their own doing is is literally caught between the proverbial rock and the hard place. They can't actually appoint any of those FRAP implementers. On the IT side, which is absolutely critical, the only remotely qualified and suitable candidate there is Datacentrics. The other entity that applied is a non-entity. They don't even have a website, but they're going to run a very complex IT platform and rights allocation process, which has been said to run online entirely for 140 odd billion rand rights allocation process. So, and then similarly with the legal team, I mean, you've got some obviously decent law firms that have applied, but of course they're decent law firms predominantly based in Joburg, don't know phishing, don't know the structure of the industry, corporate law firms that specialize in labor, litigation, mergers and acquisitions law. They don't know fisheries law, they don't know admin law. So again, on every which front, the people who are the experts and who know fishing and the sectors and how it works have essentially voted with their feet and said, absolutely no way will we participate on behalf of the minister's process. And I think there's reasons why. It's quite obvious.
Yeah, and I mean, if I just go chronologically, and I mean, I've been also involved a bit in the FRAP, and I see in 2018 there was a gazette that said, okay, we're going to commence the FRAP process with applications. But then I found it interesting, like when the minister set office, I think around August 2019. Then she withdrew that whole gazette that it's not going to commence. But for me, it's just, I was thinking, okay, so you assume office. What do you think? What is the thinking? So they say, okay, we're going to commence 2018. And then she says, no, we can't commence. So there must be there was a trigger or something saying, okay, but we're not ready for this. Do you maybe know, like in detail what that was?
Well, it's typical ANC factional policies that come into play here that are so destructive. We see how destructive it plays out in every other aspect of our society and economy. But this is how it plays out in fisheries. And that is, you have a minister who knows absolutely nothing about fishing, comes into office with advisors who know nothing about fishing. They all came from Gauteng, remember. She was the Minister of Finance in Gauteng. The existing professional team in office, because of course she comes there with an ANC factional mandate. And then she seeks, and she has been systematically dismantling everything that was done, by her predecessors. It's as if, this is what's so bemusing about the ineptness of ANC politics, and that is, it's, every time there's a new minister that comes into office because of whatever reason, an election or cabinet shuffle, it's as if they are taking over from a diametrically opposed opposition politic and ideology. It's as if they've got to redo the entire structure and business. I mean, we've even seen the farcical changing of the name of the department. I mean, that's a priority for these people, as opposed to ensuring fishing rights are better. So it was about factionalism. I mean, I've been in the position where we've had a change of ministers. I was working in the department when Vali Musa left government with the change in elections in 2004. Van Schalkwyk was appointed. And, we never, ever, I mean, he was essentially a National Party minister. Did he seek to dismantle and destroy and disrupt, as we see here. And that's why. Had she just accepted professional advice, consulted extensively with industry in 2018 when she took office, she could have built on what Zokwana handed her, and that gazette which set out the initial steps of the FRAP. So what we have is, well, she's gone 3 years backward.
And then Shane, also there were two councils also that was supposed to be formed. I think the one was totally abolished and the other one was just up for renewal. So it was the Fisheries Transformation Council and then of course the Consultative Advisory Forum, two of those. Well, what is are they two still together? Do they work with each other? Because I'm just trying to figure out, and is it a requirement that those councils be established before FRAP can commence?
Oh no, not at all. I mean, okay. Look, I mean, they have an historical aspect and reason why they were brought into the Marine Living Resources Act. You know, and we never used either. When I was at Fisheries, we didn't have a consultative advisory forum and we didn't have a Fisheries Transformation Council. I mean, the FTC was, I think, disbanded in 1999, 1998, shortly after it came into existence, because it was just a cesspool of corruption. It was an avenue for members to allocate quotas to themselves and to their spouses. And I think people in the fishing industry know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, it had a ruinous reputation from day one. The Consultative Advisory Forum, well, you know, it was necessitated in the beginning because of a transition from, you know, one form of management to another. You must remember that it came about when the old Sea Fisheries Chief Directorate was transformed into a much higher level fisheries branch, marine and coastal management. So it was meant to oversee and usher in an era of a fundamentally research-based Sea Fisheries Institute into a more management, socioeconomic based fisheries institute with the name Marine and Coastal Management at the time. So the CAF had a specific function, and then its function by 2002 had pretty much run its course, and with adequate expertise and structuring of the department at the time, the branch MCM at the time, there wasn't very much reason for the CAF to continue. But they neither are prerequisites for a fishing rights allocation process to continue. Indeed, have they been, of course, 2013 and 16 would never have been able to have taken place, or 05.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, because I mean, when I read the act, I thought that would be a prerequisite because they have to advise or assist because prerequisite was that they have to be some fisheries experts and understand marine living resources. Just thought it was a council that needed to advise the minister or the delegated authority in deciding the FRAP applications. Okay, cool. Then the other one is, of course, like I said, a lot has happened, little has happened. The resources split. We also saw 2 or 3 weeks ago, squid was split between commercial and inshore. I mean, I know the proposed one was initially it was a 80 or 70-30 split, and then they decided on it was a 50-50 split, and then they decided on a 85-25 split with the option of extending it within 2 years. Yeah, I mean, I have a good understanding of squid and how it impacts small scale and commercial. What's your views?
Well, I mean, I think we should expect litigation in there on that decision. I think I've said it on my blog and I've said it on Twitter. It's unlawful, patently unlawful. Squid is not a small-scale sector by definition. So the minister's own definition of what is a small-scale fishery under the MLRA and the regulations excludes squid. So by definition, squid could never be there. Practically, and of course commercially, again, unless you've got a 10 million rand plus freezer cat capable of blast freezing squid at sea and then directly into the EU, well, you can't. Small scale harvesting of squid is landing it on the beach, getting it full of sand, and maybe selling it for a few cents for bait. That is not the fishery. It just won't work. So what we're seeing is paper quotas. So the cooperatives that were these 15% deductions, which have cost 300 odd people crew jobs already in the industry. We're very good at that. This ANC government is exceptionally good at destroying jobs. That we got to hand it to them. They don't fail at that at all. So within a stroke of a pen, last week we understand 300 odd jobs were gone, and there'll be more to follow because, of course, there's also this limitation of no more than 120-day sea day limit for vessels. So considering that there are over 200 days possibly that a vessel can be deployed in the fishery, not as much as 200, about 150, 170 days. The cut isn't just 15%. But what we are seeing, of course, is that these cooperatives that were given rights are now selling their crew allotments to the existing commercial operators. So they're just fronting and they're just paper quotas. So so we not only destroy jobs and value and investments, we create fronts and paper quotas. So I literally, it's bemusing to the nth degree with this lot.
Yeah. So do you expect that the industry, the industry, because it is unlawful, the industry, of course, have to take the minister on and challenge it?
Yeah, so that's what we were hearing, is that SASMIA and members are considering a review application. You must remember that the decision was taken by the DG, and in terms of Section 14 of the MLRA. It's also unclear as to whether the DG has the requisite authority under the delegations, because we always assume that the DG of the fisheries branch has been delegated the authority to decide TACs and TAEs. It would be bizarre that the DG in Pretoria decides how much fish gets allocated in specific sectors. That's one aspect which is troubling, the legality of the delegated decision. But of course, a delegated decision wouldn't necessarily mean it has to be appealed first. So you can't just go and review the decision. The internal remedy must be exhausted first. But of course, given the immediate harm to jobs and possibly market investments, etc., client contracts, the industry could get an interdict and halt that decision pending the internal appeal. So that would be up to SASMIA and industry right holders there to decide how to proceed.
Yeah, and also, you're speaking about the SASMIA decision, and after reading the horse mackerel papers and the correspondence and looking at the SASMIA, it seems like all this could have prevented just by normal consultation with the industry. It almost seems like there's that missing link, and a lot could be solved by just speaking to the fishing industry and allowing them to give comment.
Yeah, it's an extremely frustrating state of affairs, and again, it's it's an ANC ideology that affects like a cancer. Every other sector. You see, there's an unwillingness to engage. It's an arrogance coupled with ignorance, and that's a dangerous combination. And you're quite right. Basic and regular consultation would just avoid a lot of these issues. In 2015, when I was asked by Zokwana at the time to fix the mess he inherited from Jumat Peterson during the 2013 rights allocation process, we had massive discontent with squid, tuna pole, as well as lionfish. The traditional lionfish had the minister in court. Sackler had taken the minister to court, and she, as Zokwana at the time, wasn't able to answer their papers, and correctly so, because Jumat Peterson's decisions were just blatantly unlawful at the time. But again, conflict and catastrophe were avoided, and that is simply because Zokwana was of the opinion, and he allowed us, his appeals advisory team, which comprised myself and Professor Julian Smith and the attorney Mamake Mdluli from Mpumalanga, to consult extensively, and that's what we did. We consulted extensively with Sackler, with Sasmia, with the tuna pole industry, and we found, a resolution. And at the end of the day, Sackler withdrew their litigation. Squid didn't proceed with any litigation, and people got their rights. Jobs weren't lost. Same in tuna pole. But that simply requires an acknowledgement that you don't know everything, and that there are other people who have ideas, who have solutions, who have information, who have data that you can share, and can help you. And together you make good decisions. Why that isn't understood is just beyond me.
Yeah, but I mean, would the fisheries associations, should that not be what they're there for? I mean, or what's I mean, I'm not involved in any association, but what is the relationship with an association and the department? Shouldn't there be some form of communication, open door approach with them, or is it similar to industry?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, my understanding is that it's very antagonistic. The minister doesn't believe in adequate or effective consultation. It's a completely antagonistic us-them approach. Hence, she's in the position she finds herself in. Hence, she finds herself being humiliated every few months in court with another loss and another costs order. There's just, I can't explain it. I've never come across such levels of belligerence, stupidity, and arrogance. And these are people who are charged with taking decisions that affect billions of rands of investments, thousands of jobs. And then we ask ourselves why we are at the unemployment levels we're at.
But I mean, Shane, what is the role then of the portfolio committee for fisheries? I mean, aren't they supposed to be?
Well, they are so hopeless. I mean, they're breathtakingly, ridiculously stupid. I mean, just look at some of those minutes, and you wanna hang yourself. I mean, the levels of discussion are pedantic to the nth degree. I mean, and it hasn't changed. I mean, I've sat in portfolio committee meetings where you literally just want to bang your head on the desk and hope it's over. I mean, to say that most of those members come there for the coffee, cake, and lunch is not an exaggeration. I mean, what have they ever done to ensure a proper and legitimate allocation process? What have they ever done to ensure accountability of the money put into the Marine Living Resources Fund? Nothing. That is why we're in this position as well. You have a completely out of depth portfolio committee. I mean, it's just woeful. I mean, it's very depressing on that front alone.
Yeah. Okay, but I mean, now if we talk FRAP 2020, 2021, I mean, what must happen to, I mean, just to get the ball rolling so people can understand what's happening? I mean, do you find that there is less communication from this FRAP than from a previous FRAP, or more openness, transparency?
Oh no, I mean, no. That's obviously rhetorical. I mean, there's zero communication. I mean, you know, I was looking back at 2005, for example. You know, there were in the run up in the 18 months before the allocation process was set to happen. We used to have weekly press briefings with the leading journalists at the time, the fisheries journalists at the time. You know, we unfortunately don't have that anymore either, because of the decimation of the independent media platform. So we used to have John Yeld and Melanie Gosling and Ronnie Morris from Business Report at the time, you know, and a whole lot of other journalists who'd a young Craig McEwen now, who's with Amul Bangani as well. So I mean, you know, there were regular communications. We used to make sure at least weekly we would provide public updates, and of course industry representatives who were still around and were there then, and quota holders would vouch for the fact that, you know, at any stage they could pick up a phone and get updates. There was a dedicated website. I mean, look at the state of the fisheries website. You can't even, you know, it's so outdated. They still have the old DAF addresses on there. You actually can't, you don't even know what their email addresses are anymore. But there was a dedicated mcm.gov.za website where you found all the information about where we're at in that week for the Altram process at the time. Then, of course, for small scale, because of course those days wasn't, you know, instability was nowhere near as widely available as it is today. But for small scale, the oysters, the mussels, the line fishermen, we produced a weekly newsletter, leaflet, that was available both in diagrammatic form as well as in written form. That was available in Xhosa, Zulu, English, and Afrikaans. And that went out weekly, every week, without fail, in the 18 months to the run-up. So people knew exactly what was going on. And that we have access to, and the very, very wide access to internet connectivity that is available to almost every fisherman, whether it's Twitter, you know, and Facebook and other platforms. But there's no when last has she addressed fisheries? Probably last year. It's as if fisheries just does not exist. It's simply not a priority.
Are you still there, Shane?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sorry, it's breaking up. Okay, so yeah, so I think if we just talk about the FRAP 2020 and we're saying there still needs to be the rollout of the policies, all the CS reports have to be completed. I understand from previous FRAP processes, there needs to be a national roadshow and people explaining. I mean, under COVID, I don't know that's going to happen. Service providers need to be appointed. I mean, there's just so much that still has to happen. I mean, in your head, what is the timeline? Sorry. Are you there?
Yeah, did you hear me?
Oh, no, sorry. Can you repeat that? Yeah, something just happened.
Oh, okay, sorry. No, I'm saying in my view, I reckon we're in about 2017. That's pretty much where we're at. Beginning of 2017.
And okay, so can the rights be postponed after December 31st, 2021? I mean, can it just be rolled over again?
It couldn't have been rolled over in the first place. I'm on record, and there's a blog article, a couple blog articles about it. The issuing of exemptions to extend a rights allocation process is unlawful, and it's widely recognized. There was a reason in the last time a rights allocation process was or had to have been extended and was legitimately and properly done so was in 2000, when Valley Musa decided that due to the various issues at the at Marine and Coast Management, there had to have been a rollover, and then he went to Parliament, and an amendment to the Marine Resources Act 18.6 capital A was passed, allowing for once-off extension of those fishing rights. The utilization of Section 81 grant exemptions is an abuse, and should it be challenged, but of course nobody's going to challenge it because it's not in any existing right holder's interest to do so, it would be held to be unlawful because the minister cannot extend or bypass Parliament under Section 18 and unilaterally just grant extensions. And we've seen it's happening ad infinitum. You see the interim relief process, which is hardly interim in any understanding of the word, which has been running since 2007. It's probably one of the, it's the second longest rights allocation process currently on the table. Abalone, I've mentioned abalone before. Abalone's been extended by exemption every year since 2013. So this is going to be its 10th year of an unlawful exemption extension. So, I foresee that, for all intents and purposes, as we've seen with these other exemptions, where the minister has essentially sidestepped issuing permits and licenses and essentially undertaking the core business of fisheries management, we're just going to go into a farcical period of exemption upon exemption.
But I mean, if they extend it beyond to the 31st of December 2021, does it mean 15 years from date of allocation? So even if they do extend it and they extend it to 2021 August, does it mean 15 years from the date of allocation, not from when it expired? So it would mean that your rights would be 13 years and not 15 years. Is that not the case?
No, I mean, we saw with the 2016 process, the rights will run from the date of allocation. So it'll be 15 years from whenever they get the act together.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Shaheen, that's all the questions I wanted to ask you. So now we know that FRAP cannot commence before the 3rd of November if the minister does complete the appeals prior to that. So if she does it before that, then only horse mackerel can commence. But of course, they still have to do the Hake inshore trawl appeals. Am I correct?
Yeah, but of course we haven't got anything else to show for that either. We don't have a valid or defendable socioeconomic impact assessments process. What they've done is woefully inadequate. It would be set aside and reviewed if they even attempt to proceed on that basis. You can have a review. Hi.
Yeah, sorry,
I
you
think
broke up
we lost
quickly.
each other there.
Yeah, just repeat quickly.
Yeah, so we don't have any of the key foundational stones of a FRAP in place at all. So we like I said, if I say we're 2 years away from a process, I am being awfully optimistic, I reckon.
Wow.
I reckon we'll be having this
that's-
chat next year, and we'll be having it in 2023.
We had it last year, so don't push it.
Yeah. We had it last year, indeed. We spoke about this last year, and we back at the same table. We pretty much exactly at the same. There was no progress since last year. Let's put it that way. Nothing.
So what will happen if our president decides to reshuffle the cabinet and we have a new minister for fisheries again?
Oh, then our pro yeah. Like I said, we're in 2017. We're stuck in a time warp here. Unless I'm on record as saying that you got to get rid of this government.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like our connection is only allowing an hour conversation. I'll wait for you, Shaheen. Are you there? Sorry guys, it's probably just a bad connection. Just waiting for him. Oh, that's a pity. Oh man, okay, but yeah, I think I got the gist of the conversation I wanted from Shaheen. Yeah, I hope it adds a bit of value for those that want to find out more about the fishing industry. We touched a bit on FRAP. We touched a bit about the management of FRAP and his past experiences. So hopefully we can chat to him, hopefully not next year for the same thing, but we can chat to him again. But for those of you that joined, thanks so much. Yeah, until we have a next guest, we'll chat again. Goodbye.